So, welcome to our first kickoff conference, of the Global Partnership Network. I'm very happy that all of you are here. At the same time, I'm very sorry to be unable to meet you in person. We still hope that COVID-19 may be defeated or pushed back during the next year so that we may have a real kickoff conference where we will be able to have a tea and some conversations beyond the screen. So, the Global Partnership Network, what is it anyway? It is a research network which is funded by the DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, and the BMZ, Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And it is devoted to the Sustainable Development Goal number 17, the Global Partnership for Sustainable Development. We'll be focusing above all on three areas: partnerships in development cooperation, in the global economy, and in knowledge production. And if I say we, this includes a whole lot of people, and not only us here in Kassel, but our partners in universities and civil society organizations in 10 countries, in Jamaica, Haiti, in Ghana, Burkina Faso, Senegal, South Africa, Uganda, Ethiopia, in India, and yes, and in Germany as well. So these are the partner universities I've been mentioning: Haramaya University, JNU, Makerere, Rhodes, Université des Sciences Appliquées du Développement, Université d'État in Haiti, Université Virtuelle Senegal, the University of Cape Coast, the University of West Indies, and Witwatersrand in South Africa. These are all civil society organizations: Action Aid in India and Uganda, Palais Citoyen, Caribbean Coastal Area Management Foundation, Catherine Hall Community Development Committee, EarthLife, Ndlovu-Gathseni Sahel, Ghana Permaculture Institute, Institut Culturel Karl Levesque, Jamaican Network of Rural Women's Producers, Kalpavix, Medico, Miserio, Redes, the Slash Roots Foundations, and Solidarité Fund Aisia, and the Third World Network in Accra. So, what are we doing together in this network? We are, first of all, we have a governance structure. All important decisions are being taken by the International Steering Committee and the International Academic Committee. Hopefully soon in the future, we will also have an advisory board, but we're as yet working on it. And the local structure in Kassel is a bit special because we do not only have a local committee, as you all have in your universities, but we also have what we call the board of directors, which are actually some very nice colleagues who assist me in the day-to-day work and the staff. So basically they will be presenting themselves as another point on the agenda, because we think that you have so far seen very little of them. Nevertheless, they are also important. What have we done so far? We have been building up the communication infrastructure, and as you know, we've had the calls for PhD fellowships, for small research projects and workshops, and for the visiting professorship. And to all these calls, we received applications, and in the International Steering Committee, Academic Committee, we decided on the selection of the persons and projects to be funded. What are we going to do in the future? We'll be continuing, of course, to distribute those fellowships. We also will be trying to set up a joint MA program. Above all, we will be developing together with all of you, basically, e-learning tools and open educational resources. We are right now in setting up the graduate school to provide workshops and courses for the PhD students. We'll also be having conferences, mostly virtual conferences, not only due to COVID-19, but also due to the idea that for ecological reasons, we would like to avoid air travel and corresponding CO2 emissions. There will be research cooperations and visits at all partner universities, and of course, the academic workshops, policy workshops, and workshops specifically for development organizations and marginalized groups. And each semester we'll be inviting an eminent scholar from the South to the Wangari Maathai visiting professorship here in Kassel. However, we still haven't really talked about the content and the global partnerships and the problems we see with the global partnerships. And if we look at them, we find that there are still colonial patterns which shape the partnership in development cooperation, starting from the basic fact that development cooperation deals with interventions in the South, usually based on knowledge from the North, which we still see as a sort of colonial pattern. A second problem we see is the lack of accountability. Development experts who set up these projects are accountable often to their own institutions, sometimes to the funding institutions as well, but rarely, if ever, to the project affected people. This is why we think that the inspection panel of the World Bank and accountability mechanisms like this are an important improvement which has to be strengthened. It is very necessary because despite some accountability mechanisms, we are still faced with a situation where each year 10 to 15 million people are being displaced each year by development projects. The most infamous probably being the Sardar Sarovar Dam in the Narmada Valley in India, but there are countless projects like this. And it has to be said, the majority of them are run by the national governments, not by the World Bank, although the World Bank is still very, very guilty, as we all know. Second cluster, second research area, global economy. It is also shaped by colonial patterns. The financial transfers from south to north are twice as large as those in the opposite direction. The largest portions of this are related to illicit transfers, money being basically sent by elites in the south to Swiss bank accounts, by debt service, and by the repatriation of profits from multinational companies whose headquarters usually are not in the south, despite some shifts. Some are, in fact, of course, to be found in Japan and China and South Korea. So a second area which we need to tackle is what has been called the free trade imperialism, pushing local producers off the market because the competitors in other countries are just too strong. A notable example could be seen in Ghana, where the poultry farmers saw their market share decreasing from 95% to 11%, the Ghanaian poultry farmers, within 1 decade due to imports from the European Union. Another problem, and there could be even more we could cite, another problem is land grabbing. Only since 2007, there have been land deals, so basically land being sold to foreign investors in the area of 20 to 50 million hectares. So if we take the average figure of 35 million hectares, this is about the size of Germany. And only since 2007. So these figures are already a few years old. So by now it's probably even more. This is also something where we see that the problem of neocolonialism is still present, even if some of the players are new, especially in the area of land grabbing. We see investors from Saudi Arabia, from India, from China playing a prominent role. Third area, knowledge production. What's the problem here? We still see that in general, global inequality is often still framed in terms of underdevelopment, not in terms of exploitation or injustice. And we still see that the knowledge of the West is still treated as privileged, while indigenous knowledge is often being ignored. This is something that our keynote, Sabelo Ndlovu-Gathseni, will hopefully also tell us something about. That this indigenous knowledge is being ignored includes even philosophical concepts like Ubuntu. But even apart from that, there's a host of things we could learn, we here in the North could learn from the South. And this opportunity is being neglected so far. And this relates to institutional innovations, like the courts in Rwanda, for example. But it also relates to experiences and everyday knowledge that migrants from other continents could bring to Africa, to Europe, I'm sorry, could bring to Europe, and so that what we learn would be shaped more by global experiences and less by European experiences only. So these problems are some of those that shall be tackled in the research in the Global Partnership Network. Concerning partnerships in development cooperation, we'll be focusing on questions of access, of accountability, and of deep participation. Concerning the global economy, we'll be focusing on agriculture, finance, and transitions towards renewable energy. And in knowledge production, we'll be dealing with Eurocentrism and alternative knowledges. So we are most curious and looking forward to our research cooperations during the next years. And we are very grateful that so many learned scholars, and brilliant people, and devoted activists are part of our GPN here. So to conclude, so not to take more time and to basically cause delays in the agenda. To conclude, I would mention we have been now talking about colonial patterns, but colonialism and related to it, of course, capitalism and patriarchy are not the only challenges for global partnerships, especially if we're talking about sustainability. And this is why I would like to end with some words borrowed from Wangari Maathai and her Nobel Peace Prize lecture in 2004, where she said, "Today we are faced with a challenge that calls for a shift in our thinking so that humanity stops threatening its life support system. We are called to assist the earth to heal her wounds and in the process heal our own, indeed to embrace the whole of creation in all its diversity, beauty, and wonder. This will happen if we see the need to revive our sense of belonging to a larger family of life." With these words, I would like to end, and I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hand back to Kwesi.
Thank you, Aram. Yes, thank you for introducing us to the scope, the partners, and some of the research areas and aims of the GPN. We would now proceed with a few video greeting notes that we have received for this occasion. And the first greeting note comes from Professor Rainer Finkelday, who's the president of the University of Kassel.
I'm very happy to welcome you as the president of the University of Kassel to this virtual kick-off conference of the Global Partnership Network. Unfortunately, I cannot be live today, but technology makes it possible for me to send you a few words of welcome this way. We have all become accustomed to these blessings of modern technology in the recent months, but what must not be forgotten, however, is that these blessings can also sometimes be curses. By this I do not only mean annoying sound or picture disturbances, but also the question of the availability and the production conditions of modern technology. So when we sit in front of a screen or a laptop, as we do today, we must not forget that for some people internet access is still unavailable, or that people are exploited in the production of raw materials needed for the production of smartphones or computers. I'm therefore all the more pleased that with GPN we have been able to establish the second EXCEED Center at the University of Kassel to deal with these very important issues. In other words, with questions about international production conditions, about development cooperation, and in particular about Sustainable Development Goal number 17, Partnership for the Goals. As you may know, we have recently decided to set up our own center here at the University of Kassel for research and teaching on all 17 Sustainable Development Goals. I am sure that there will be plenty of opportunities for cooperation between GPN and the new center at the University of Kassel. I am also very happy that the existence of a second EXCEED Center, the ICDD, with its Global Labor University, could also be secured. This will enable us to provide important international impulses for sustainable development from our campus here in Kassel. In this spirit, I wish you a successful conference with many interesting encounters. Thank you very much.
All right. Having heard from the president of University of Kassel, we now move on to a next greeting message. This one comes from Sherif Asab Els, who is a program manager for the EXCEED program at DAAD, the German Academic Exchange Service, who is co-funding the GPN through the EXCEED program in conjunction with the German Federal Ministry for Development Cooperation.
Thank you very much. I just wonder if you can hear me, if I'm audible right now. Yeah, great. Thanks a lot. My name is Sherif Asab Els. I'm in charge of the EXCEED program, Higher Education Excellence in Development Cooperation. And it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you today to the kickoff meeting of the Global Partnerships Network on behalf of DAAD, German Academic Exchange Service, and Lars Gerold, Head of Section for Higher Education, Institutional Building and Development Cooperation. EXCEED is a funding program that is financed by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. In the last 10 years, EXCEED has been conducted in a close collaboration with 5 international networks of German universities and their partner organizations in the Global South. As we've just heard from the president of the University of Kassel, one of these networks has been established by the University of Kassel, which is the International Center for Development and Decent Work, ICDD. On one hand, the outstanding achievements of EXCEED networks can be shown in the outcomes, which we follow through a results-oriented monitoring on a regular basis. And on the other hand, these achievements of EXCEED as a program have been also noted by an independent evaluation team at the end of 2018. The evaluation of the whole program and of each of these networks revealed that EXCEED program is a unique one, since no similar program could have been found in the funding landscape of such a holistic approach, using instruments in the field of research, teaching, and policy impact, and following a network approach, including extramural organizations, all within the broader frame of the SDGs. We have already seen in the introduction of Professor Ziai a lot of extramural NGOs and other organizations. This was, amongst others, a good reason for BMZ and DAAD to relaunch the program for another funding phase for the next 5 years. Now, the engagement of the University of Kassel goes on. Today, we celebrate the start of the Global Partnership Network with many partner institutions situated in 9 partner countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. GPN targets research, teaching, and training that investigate the global partnerships for sustainable development. Focusing on the 17th SDG, which aims at strengthening the means of implementation in the context of global partnerships for sustainable development, GPN aims at building a sustainable structure, developing joint research projects, providing students and young scholars with qualifications related to sustainable development challenges, as well as fostering the scientific exchange between the partner universities. The unique feature of GPN can be found in the expected impacts of the network. The outcomes of GPN will be useful for the contribution to all sustainable development goals, and therefore to the achievement of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. And I'm very confident that your teams in Germany and all over the world will foster the role which universities can play in contributing to solving challenges related to the SDGs. I wish you all the best for your collaboration, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Mr. Sharifi. Mr. Sharifi Els, to take the time to speak to us personally and greet us at the inception of the GPN. Now, as Professor Aram Ziai alluded to earlier, the GPN has a board of directors, and these directors will now introduce themselves and their work to you, starting with Professor Christian Herzig. So, Christian, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Kwesi. Hi, everyone. A warm welcome also from my side to our virtual GPN Kick-off conference. As Kwesi said, my name is Christian Herzig. I'm heading the unit of Management in International Food Business, and currently I'm acting as the Vice Dean of the Organic Agricultural Sciences faculty at the University of Kassel. I am happy to introduce myself briefly as one of the board members working on this exciting program together with Aram, Hirihandu, Elizabeth, and Hubertus, and also along with fantastic other members of the GPN team here at Kassel, and so many other wonderful colleagues and partner institutions from all over the world. Before I say a few words about myself, I would like to thank you all for being with us today. A special thanks from my side, of course, also goes to our keynote speakers, or especially the president of the university, Professor Finkeldey, and Mr. Asap Els. I think we are all very grateful that the DID has chosen our GPN as one of the new 7 centers of excellence for exchange and development. I guess that through the funding provided by the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development and the DID's Exceed program, we all hope, and I guess I'm speaking on behalf of all the board members, to be able to make substantial and sustainable contributions to a fair and sustainable world economy and joint knowledge production in global cooperation. I had already the pleasure to participate in the former Exceed Center, the International Center for Development and Decent Work, also led by another wonderful director, Professor Christoph Scherer. And as a member of the working group on global agricultural production systems, we looked at the role of actors and institutions in creating more responsible and sustainable agri-food supply chains. And in research projects I've been involved in, we have studied hybrid forms of value chain management and production networks in the cocoa sector to enable decent work, especially for small farmers, smallholder farmers, as they are usually the most vulnerable protagonists of these networks. And I'm really pleased that we can continue our efforts and work in this and many other related areas, focusing on global partnerships for sustainable development with the ultimate aim, I guess, of providing policy recommendations for more successful and genuine partnerships in the global economy. I'm therefore very pleased to have been asked to coordinate the research cluster 2 of our global partnership network, as briefly introduced by Aram before, the global economy, which addresses 3 important and interrelated areas, namely agriculture, finance, and renewable energy. So I'm very much looking forward to learning more about your research in these areas, to working with you and to learning from your experience, not only during this conference, but also over the next 4 to 5 years. And as Aram said in the beginning, the GPN, I guess, will provide you all with a platform where you can share your experiences and collaborate on research projects, doctoral supervision and teaching. We therefore look forward to exploring with you the reasons for success and failure of partnerships, providing analysis and policy recommendations for policy coherence, and hopefully achieving more true and fair cooperation in a world that at the moment seems to stand still, but remains global during and after the corona pandemic. That's all from my side. Kwesi, do you want to announce the next member? I'm not sure who was on the list. Is it Elizabeth or Rihandu?
Okay, then I would invite Rehandu to speak to us next.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kwesi. Thank you, Christian. Also from my side, welcome to everybody. I hope you can hear me. I'm truly excited to be here today. And I'm very, very glad that we're able to kick off the GPN after such a long process of preparation and of collaboration that promises to be extremely exciting in the years to come. My name is Ndlovu-Gathseni. I am the visiting professor for international gender politics at the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Kassel. And I've been involved with the GPN since I began in early 2019 in this position. International gender politics at the University of Kassel is transnational and intersectional in its approach and has been here since 2013. As a part of the political science section. And it's in this capacity and with this background that I come to the GPN, having focused on feminist approaches to international politics and Southern relations, which are also normative and have focused on areas such as development politics, post-colonial studies, and African-Chinese relations of late. I've been invited to head the cluster for partnership and development cooperation within the GPN, which, as Aram has mentioned, focuses on questions of access, accountability, and deep participation. And next to my involvement in the board of directors, I have also been involved in the diversity and gender questions that we've tried to take up within the GPN, and as such have formed a focal point to this effect. What makes the GPN special to me personally is a topic which within the SDGs partnership is cross-cutting, just like gender is supposed to be in international politics. The link between scholar and activist networks is also particularly interesting within the GPN. And as the past months have shown us, it is not just claimed that we are a global network, but we are a truly global network, which is based on dialogue and involves critical analysis. And in this sense and in this spirit, again, I welcome you and I look forward to the ongoing discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Rehandu. I would now invite Professor Elizabeth Twitter to speak to us next.
Yeah, thank you, Kwesi. A very warm welcome to everyone. I'm absolutely happy to be part of this kick-off meeting, to listen to you and, well, to start our cooperations or to deepen our cooperations within GPN. I am head of the research area Sociology of Diversity at Kassel University, and my research areas, my working areas, as well as Rehandu's, are strongly connected to gender relations, to gender studies, feminist perspective and approaches, but also to migration and racism. I have been working in a project on welcome culture and democracy in Germany. Another topic of my research and work is sexualized violence, and these all from a post-colonial and decolonial perspective. This perspective is highly influenced from many discussions and also research trips to Latin America. I have been learning a lot in all these discussions and research from colleagues from Latin America. And hello to all of you who are staying now. We have been working also together in the ICDD with colleagues. For example, I have been part of a project on coffee value chains. My special example or focus one was on coffee coming from a Zapatist region in the Mexican South. But I'm also happy within GPN context to be part of the thesis committee of GPN PhD work from Fernanda Cordova Suxo. She is going to work, or she already started now to work on construction of discourse on identities, realities, and actions from the beneficiaries of development cooperation in the Andes in Bolivia. So I'm very much looking forward and, well, give back to Kwesi.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Now, last but not least, I would now like to invite Hubertus to talk to us.
Yeah. I have to look where my video. Yes. Hello. My name is Hubertus Pischel, Professor for Modern History at the University of Kassel, and I'm also very glad to be part of the GPN. And well, I would wish we could meet together and sit down, have discussion, have some drinks and food, but at least we managed to have this online conference, and I would like to thank the whole team and everybody for you that we can take part of the GPN, but also on this conference. To my own work, I have worked for some years on a book on sustainable development on a terminology, what is called Hilfe zur Selbsthilfe, a German development goal, what is based on self-education and the promise for sustainable development. And I had a very critical perspective on this. And I just can underline what Aram said, that we all have the feelings, and this is also a feeling shared by many historians, that in our development processes, aid and work is still a lot of colonial structure. And I would like to discuss all this with you, and I'm looking very much forward for the supervision of PhD thesis and your knowledge. And I really would like also to thank the DAAD and the whole team and all the colleagues that we can establish and can work in this really global and international exchange work. And let us hope that COVID is very soon history, and that we can find a way also to meet together and have a little bit a closer exchange, because I really think that it is very important to establish this collaboration in future. I am sure that I will learn a lot of you, and I hope that I also can contribute a little bit to the debates and to your work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Hubertus. Moving on, we would now like to present a selection of video introductions that were sent by our university and civil society partners, and that have been put together by our student assistant, Tata Diawara. Before we start showing these videos, I would like to remind you that 2 of these videos will be in French language. So those of you like myself, who would require translation for this, are now invited to switch to the English channel on your Zoom account, so that you can benefit from our translation of these videos. Those of you who have a working command of French can, of course, just stay in the main channel, which would mean that you will hear the English videos in English and the French videos in French. And with that, I would kindly ask our technical team to start the videos.
For the last nearly 50 years, ActionAid Association, in taking sides with the poor and vulnerable and the oppressed people, has worked across the country towards ending poverty and injustice in India. We work in partnership with social organizations, activists, volunteers, as well as directly in 26 states of India, and currently focus on segments such as, or what we call synergy areas such as land, water, commons, forests, and in a defense of nature. We work on agendas of labor and workers' rights, as well as towards ending urban poverty, particularly focusing on urban poverty and particularly focusing on informal workers. We work on women's rights, on advancing women's rights. We work on the question of children's rights and public education and deepening public education. We also focus on questions of peace and justice linked to peace. These form our primary areas of focus for now. We've had a long history of working on internationalist issues and promoting internationalism, both on the North-South and South-South axis. For we believe that many of the causes which perpetuate poverty and which cause poverty, injustice and deprivation and disenfranchisement are international in nature. And therefore a long history of our work deals with building solidarities among people internationally, among people's struggles internationally. Grounded participatory research as a means to advance input into public policy making, as well as a means to serve the cause of people's struggles, forms an important and integral portion of our part of our work. And it is in this regard that the partnership with Global Partnership Network, comprised of 9 universities and 19 social organizations across different countries in Asia, Africa and Latin America and Europe, would be very, very interesting for us. It will provide new basis for collaboration across different issues, across different agendas and across different countries, and obviously across people's struggles on those very spaces. So we are looking forward to the next 5 years of enriched collaboration with Global Partnership Network in terms of expanding people's activism, in terms of expanding progressive public policy making for the cause of people in the service of majorities of the world, and of course for added research and development in academic circles as well.
Je m'appelle Ousmane Mifal Nampane. Je suis le secrétaire exécutif du Ballet Citoyen. Le Ballet Citoyen donc, est une organisation de la société civile. Pourquoi le ballet citoyen? Parce que la
Why the citizens' broom?
Parce que le ballet,
because the broom
is
an instrument, an object that is used to clean all the waste.
Donc, le ballet citoyen,
so the broom is intended
to
help
la chose par l'engagement citoyen, c'est-à-dire en nettoyant tout ce qui est corruption, tout ce qui est mal gouvernance. C'est pour cela aussi que nous disons, ils ont utilisé la symbolique du ballet citoyen aussi. Parce que, en disant notre nom et notre force, parce que quand vous prenez l'ensemble des leviers, c'est difficile à casser lorsqu'ils sont ensemble. Et quand vous le prenez en individuel, il est facilement cassable. Donc, notre nom et notre force peut rejoindre également le créneau du réseau, parce que plus nous sommes nombreux, plus nous sommes forts. Donc,
the stronger we are.
À la symbolique du ballet que nous appelons ballet.
So in addition to the symbolism of the broom, which we call the citizens' broom, we officially hand over to you the symbol of our organization.
Les premières années de vie du ballet citoyen.
The first year of life of the citizens' broom was devoted to the struggle for the limitation of presidential mandates. This is something that is now rooted in the constitution of Burkina Faso since 2015. So the citizens' broom has repositioned itself as a permanent player in the field of citizenship and even in the mobilization of young people on issues relating to governance, security, and social dialogue. We know that each organization has its own characteristics. So we expect from the members of the GPN a mutual recognition of each organization's competencies or expertise based on equal participation and shared decision-making. So we also expect a frank collaboration in the actions that we have brought. So this said, we wish the GPN a long life Our number is our strength. Thank you.
My name is Paul Yeboah. I'm the founder of Ghana Permaculture Institute. Ghana Permaculture Institute is located at Bafi in Kranza. We are at the Ghana Permaculture Institute demonstration site. We acquired this land in the year 2012. This is where people were winning gravels for the Tamale main road. So when we acquired the land, people were saying that this land is an agricultural land. But since we have the tools, which is Ghana permaculture principles, that we are going to use on the land just to reclaim the land. We have a lot of degradable land in Ghana that we can use these principles to reclaim the land. So we have a lot of activities going on over here. Activities which is generating income, which is recycling our waste, which is trying for us to become financially sustainable. This is how the soil looks like before we bought it for Ghana Permaculture Institute project. All the topsoil of the soil is gone. But before you can reclaim it, we started using sawdust, we started using chicken manure, and then we level it on the top of the soil for about 1.5 feet. And then we started planting moringa plant on the land and nitrogen fixing plants like lucina, gliricidia, cowpea, groundnut, and then pigeon pea on the land, so that we can get more nutrient on the land. And after that, we also started growing some of the annual crops on the land. And now we can see that the land is well reclaimed. And then a lot of crops are growing on the land, and also a lot of activities are also going on the land. Moisture in the soil is improved, and then the fertility in the soil is also improved, and then microorganisms also in the soil is also improved, and also erosion is also well controlled. And then we are catching more water and then storing in the soil for any crops that we are growing on the land. Because Ghana Permaculture Institute don't want to depend upon foreign donors, but we want to generate our own income just to sustain our business in Ghana, so that the project can keep up and running. Here is Ghana Permaculture Institute. This is the first building that we put up at Ghana Permaculture Institute called Base Camp. And also we have different type of buildings at the site. We have a wooden story building, we have cafeteria, and then we also have a mushroom cropping house, and also we have where we process moringa dry leaves into powder, and also where we process citronella oil. This is where we harvest our rainwater from the root catchment, and then we have a well, like a well or a pit, where we have cemented inside. We have a cover, so all the rainwater gets into this pit, and then we can take the rainwater and then reuse it again. And this is what you call chicken trotter. We use this one to put our chickens inside, so that we can move the chickens, and the chickens will scratch, and also their feces will also improve the soil. And here is also a chicken coop that we have used car ties for the chicken coop. And also we have our ICT center where we train the youth, where people come and then learn the ICT. They can come and also browse and then check their email and then learn the computer. So this is also another part, that sector that we have in Ghana Permaculture Institute.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Akadu Bayere. I'm a staff member of Haramaya University, working at the Rural Development and Agricultural Extension Department. I'm a professor of institutional and resource economics. I'm happy to be a member of Global Partnership Network, and I'm expecting a lot from this network in terms of sharing knowledge, experiences, working together on different projects that would produce impact in terms of transforming our society, and particularly through supervising PhD students jointly and developing research proposals that would produce impact on the ground. And I will spend a lot of effort in terms of joining my colleagues who are participating in this network. And the network extends for the next 3 to 4 years. I am very sure that we will do something that is tangible and that can also generate impacts on the ground through our research that our PhD students are conducting, and that we do in collaboration. And at the same time, this network would create a fertile ground for all of us to extend our collaboration beyond the project lifetime. And that is that I can see as potential. Thank you very much.
Jawaharlal Nehru University, popularly known as JNU, which came into being in 1969, is widely considered the foremost university not only in India but in developing countries in general, with a global reputation for teaching and research. Its educational philosophy, particularly in the social sciences and humanities, is strongly rooted in transdisciplinarity and embedded in the Nehruvian objectives of social justice, international understanding, and a scientific approach to problems of society. The university has rightly earned worldwide prestige for its creative endeavors, critical thinking, and much valued knowledge outputs. The School of Social Sciences, whose faculties associated with the Global Labour University program and also the Global Partnership Network, was established in the early 1970s and comprises of 13 interdisciplinary centers. The research and teaching of these are central to the themes of GPN, namely partnerships in development cooperation, partnerships in global economy, and partnerships in knowledge production. The underlying philosophy that guided the evolution of initial structure of the school was based on the view that for a proper understanding of social reality, an interdisciplinary approach to the study of social sciences was an imperative. These centers offer a whole range of innovative courses, including masters and research programs, whose course structure is based on consultative and democratic processes of evaluation and revision. In line with its overall vision, JNU has had a unique history of promoting social equity in its admission policy through positive affirmative action, which includes concerns relating to caste, tribes, gender, and other structural bases of deprivation. Such a process teaches students and researchers to question the dominant power structures and work on innovative ideas that can have very, very powerful implications for policies and academic discourses. The foundations of the university were laid by globally renowned academics who shared a progressive vision. In the course of 7 decades, the university has produced a large crop of academics, researchers, activists, policymakers, and others associated in several professional spaces who seek to contribute towards the making of a better and more equitable world. JNU's partnership with GPN will indeed go a long way in furthering these objectives. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, my name is Sally Matthews, and I am going to be introducing myself briefly in this short video and introducing my position within the GPN network. I am from Rhodes University, which you can see pictured here. Rhodes University is a small university that is in the Eastern Cape of South Africa. There is me with some of my colleagues. We're a small Department of Political International Studies, but although we're a small team, we have 700 undergraduate and about 30 to 40 postgraduate students. So we are very involved and active in the life of our students. Our university is situated in the town of Makanda, used to be known as Grahamstown, and it's here in the Eastern Cape, as you can see on the map there. It's actually a fairly small town in quite a rural area in South Africa. So I'm joining this network, I think, largely because of my interests in post-development theory and also in NGO work. I'm very excited to be part of such an international network, which has people from all over the world. So that really interests me with this network. I'm going to be doing, my research is very much on post-development theory and on NGO work. I'll be joined shortly by a PhD student who will be working on post-development theory and looking at how development plays out in a small marginalized community in Zimbabwe. I'm hoping also to have some other students working on NGOs and other areas of development. So yeah, I'm very excited to join this network. I'm hoping that I'll be able to meet in person after this COVID time with some of the other members of the network. It's really exciting to me that we can have this network that brings people together from all around the world. Thank you. Goodbye.
Bonjour, chers collègues, partenaires du GPN.
Hello, dear colleague, partners of the GPN.
Je suis le directeur du pôle lettres, sciences humaines et sciences de l'éducation de l'Université virtuelle du Sénégal. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi de parler de l'importance de ce partenariat qui a vu 3 étudiants octroyer des bourses de doctorat et de master. Alors, ces bourses sont extrêmement importantes pour la motivation des étudiants, mais également pour accompagner l'UVS dans son effort de formation. Alors, je dis bravo au GPN et mon collègue Alphadia, qui est également enseignant et directeur des études de la même université, de cette même université de l'UVS, se joint à moi pour féliciter et encourager ce qui est en train de faire au niveau du GPN et de féliciter également nos plus proches collaboratrices qui sont Simone et Fiona. Alors, je remercie tout le monde et je pense que ce projet va aller plus loin et nous attendons un renouvellement de ce projet pour encore soutenir nos étudiants dans l'effort de développement qui est initié par le GPN. Je vous remercie.
Okay. Now that you've had a brief insight into the breadth and diversity of our network, it's now my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for today. Our keynote speaker is Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gathseni, one of the foremost scholars to engage with decolonial theory and practice in the fields of African history and politics, knowledge production, and higher education, among other topics. Professor Ndlovu-Gathseni's work highlights and investigates what he calls the resurgence and insurgence of radical decolonial African thought and Black traditions. And his work includes drawing out the parallels between Latin American decolonial thought and African knowledge production and theory from the likes of African and African diasporan thinkers such as Ali Mazrui, Walter Rodney, Oyeronke Oyewumi, and Nkiru Nzegwu. Professor Ndlovu-Gathseni is a historian and theorist, and his previous positions include research professor and director of scholarship at the Department of Leadership and Transformation at the University of South Africa, where he, prior to that, was the acting executive director of the Change Management Unit in the Vice Chancellor's office of the same university, where he also practically engaged with and fostered processes of decolonizing the university. Prior to that, he held positions at CMU. He was the head of the Archie Majefe Research Institute for Applied Social Policy, and he's also the founder of the Africa Decolonial Research Network, ADRN, that is based at the University of South Africa. Since spring of this year, he is the chair of epistemologies of the Global South at the University of Bayreuth. He's a prolific writer with more than 100 publications to his name, including 9 edited and 8 sole authored books. And I'm sure these numbers are set to rise further soon. Among his latest monographs is Decolonization, Development and Knowledge in Africa, Turning Over a New Leaf, that was published this year with Routledge. So we could not have wished for a more fitting keynote speaker for today's kickoff conference. And with that, I warmly welcome Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gathseni. The floor, or rather the screen, is yours.
Oh, thank you so much, Kirsty, for the introduction, and thank you to the Global Partnership Network for inviting me. I was actually requested to address a very broad question of coloniality, global coloniality, and the partnerships in the present century. So it means I will focus specifically more on the question of knowledge rather than the other areas of partnership in which a global partnership network is involved. And my first remarks relates to the necessity of global partnerships before I go into some of the challenges which we'll need to take into account. I think this event is taking place at a very opportune moment, and indeed a moment where the issues of global partnerships are very necessary. it is a moment, if we build on the work of Emmanuel Wallerstein, is a moment where we have uncertainties of knowledges, and we have the challenge of really reorganizing the world of knowledge so that perhaps we can be relevant once again. And it is a moment again where we were witnessing what I would call an epistemic crisis, whereby the knowledges which have carried us for over the last 500 years are actually showing signs of exhaustion and giving rise to institutional, systemic, and ideological problems. And the other reason why it is important to think about partnerships today is because we want to address some of the pertinent issues of cognitive injustices, particularly the non-recognition of other ways of knowing. And I think the other major reason why we should think about global partnerships today is also the main issue of we're living in a world which, for lack of a better term, is characterized by planetary human entanglements. And those planetary human entanglements, by their very nature, they require us that we cooperate and we partner in dealing with some of the issues which we're facing. And this issue of partnerships also speaks to one of the major issues of our incompleteness if we're not working together. And if we partner, we therefore enrich the knowledge and the scholarship. Already, Aram Zahir has spoken about another reason why we need to do the partnerships today, which is the issue of tapping into those knowledges and those epistemologies and those theories and concepts which are arising from the Global South, particularly the epistemologies of the Global South, opening up the knowledge. For the past 500 years, we've been relying more and more on a knowledge of a minority of the world. And the issue of opening up to the Global South is actually opening up to the majority world of knowledge. And I think those are some of the reasons which I thought we need to reflect on as we meet to speak about global partnerships today. But I will go straight to the topic which I was given, which is the topic of the global coloniality in the domain of knowledge. And I will try to, first of all, try to define what we mean by global coloniality in the first place before we talk about its implications for global partnerships. By global coloniality, we actually were naming the continuation of the colonizer's model of the world. That is always not amenable to sustainable and equal partnerships, because at the center of global coloniality is still some of the resilient questions of treating other people as unequal with others, and therefore preventing the whole possibility of working together, of solidarities and co-presence. To be precise, the question of global coloniality is the question of trans-historic expansion of colonial domination. And today you are speaking about its perpetuation in the contemporary times. And this might sound very strange to some people who believe that the decolonization of the 20th century actually delivered a post-colonial world and a post-racial world. From a decolonial perspective, the central argument is that the dismantlement of direct colonial administration did not result in a post-colonial world and a post-racial world. In fact, we moved from direct colonialism or direct juridical colonialism to global coloniality. And that global coloniality, really spatialization of colonial-like relations at a planetary scale. We can also, because when we're thinking about the partnerships of this century, we need to really perhaps drill deeper into what are the problematic issues which cascade from the whole problem of global coloniality. I think the best way to think about the problems of today, particularly if we draw from the work of decolonial scholars, is to think deeply about the question of being human at the present moment. And think deeply about that question, particularly how do we use partnerships to subvert what colonialism imposed, particularly the issue of social classification of global population in accordance with race and its racial hierarchization. I think that's one aspect which we need to address, and that aspect of hierarchization and social classification of human population in accordance with race has implications for knowledge itself, because those who are pushed into the subcategory of subhumanity, their knowledge is generally then devalued, and it is very hard to then have sustainable and equal partnerships with some people still being considered as subhuman. And it has also a third component, which is the component of the modern global power structures. One of the issues about the partnerships of this century, we must actually make sure that they address and they indeed speaks truth to asymmetrical global power relations, which sustain inequality. Inequality not only in terms of human beings, but inequalities also in terms of knowledge production. And they indeed directly challenge some of what we call colonial matrices of power, which sustain the North-South divide that is dominant today. And in line with that, I want us to then think also about what is it that sustains these problematic patterns, colonial patterns, as Aram Zia put it. And I think one of the usable concepts which can enable us to understand these problems better is the concept of the cognitive empire. And that concept of the cognitive empire takes us to the very core of some of the roots of the problems. That the roots of the problem of today, which affect partnerships, are actually rooted in the history of the empire itself. And there is no way we can think about these partnerships in lofty terms without really addressing the question of the empire, which has given birth to the cognitive empire. And I will be very simple here. I'm thinking here about, when we are thinking about empires, one of the most well-known empires across the world is the physical empire, which comes, conquers, and administers people. And the second one is perhaps the commercial non-territorial empire, which controls the world through such tentacles as and the agencies as the World Bank, IMF. But I'm here speaking about another empire which is rarely spoken about, particularly the empire, the cognitive empire, which invades the mental universe of a people in such a way that it destroys some of the knowledges while it privileges some of the knowledges. And I think when we're thinking about these partnerships, we need to think deeply about that reality. And that takes us to another important aspects which we need to consider when we are thinking about global partnerships in this century. That is the question of the global economy of knowledge. There is an emerging argument which is very, very useful for us to put our heads together, that perhaps some people think it does not make sense today to think about knowledge of the South and the knowledge of the North. And they're building on that idea, which I introduced at the beginning, of planetary human entanglements, that were so entangled that to some people it no longer makes sense to think about knowledges of the South and the knowledges of the global North. A very interesting argument, but I think we still need to drill a bit deeper into understanding the fact that even though we wish knowledge was like that, that issue knowledge by now should actually be a commonwealth of all human beings. And we might even speak about what one of the historians from Asia talked about as the Republic of Letters. The reality on the ground is a bit different in the sense that there is still asymmetrical power relations between the global north and the global south in the knowledge domain. The global north, particularly Europe and North America, they are still very dominant in knowledge production. And one of the issues which we need to reflect on is the issue of the uneven intellectual division of labor in the knowledge domain, in which most of the scholars located in the global south, they are still more preoccupied with the hunting and the gathering of raw data, whereas the theory, the concepts, and the models come from the global north, and then they are voraciously consumed in the global south in terms of attempt to apply them in that environment. And speaking here as an active academic and intellectual, I'm speaking about really a practical problem whereby the tendency is to reduce the scholars from the global south to be area studies specialists, if not native informants. And this actually create what Pauline Ntonji, the philosopher from Benin, spoke about in terms of intellectual and academic dependency. And that is very manifest, even very practically, in terms of where do the scholars of the global south publish their work? Most of the prestigious international, so-called international journals, they're actually located in Europe and North America. And for purposes of promotion, of status and recognition and validation, you will find the scholars from the global south still having that burden of seeking to publish in the global north. I don't want to go into the other details, but the problem is not only the global north, the problem is also inside us, the intellectuals from the global south, particularly because of our process, how we were formed as intellectuals. We can't say because we're located in the global south, we're therefore free from the impact of the westernized global university system. It produced us in a particular way, in the sense that we then develop a very complex consciousness, and that complex consciousness of trying most of the time to run away from your history, to run away from your language, to run away from your culture, and they try to capture other people's languages and other people's cultures. And that is a problem which also us in the global south, we need to take seriously. And those who want to understand what I'm talking about in a deeper way, they can refer to the work of, again, the philosopher Pauline Ntonji, who raised about 13 indices of intellectual and academic dependency of the people from the global south and the global north. And I don't want to go into that. But at the same time, I don't want to create an impression that there is passivity in the global south. The people of the global south are just the way they were produced by colonialism, and they are therefore just passive in the face of the power dynamics, in the face of complex interpretations of being human, as well as the knowledge. There is a lot of initiatives, negotiations, resistances, and the struggles for epistemic freedom coming from the global south, speaking truth to this uneven intellectual division of labor. And again, I don't want to go into most of the issues, but I wanted to highlight some of the highlights of this struggle. Particularly, I'm using this term epistemic freedom, drawing from my book, Epistemic Freedom in Africa, Deprovincialization and the Decolonization, where I argued that this epistemic freedom is a right to make sense of the world from the vantage point of African experience and to engage partnerships that advance the key African struggles and aspirations. And this actually links very well with the ongoing struggles in Africa and the global South in general, where there is a vigorous attempt to decolonize the universities as institutions of production of knowledge. And that this is not a new question, it's a question which has preoccupied the people of the global South for some time. And you can also, if you want the highlights of all these struggles, you can refer to what was taking place at the University of Nairobi in 1968 to 1969, where there was even this call for the abolition of the English department. I'm raising all these issues because the issue of partnerships needs really not to therefore ignore the issues which are arising from the global South. It means actually taking them seriously into the agendas of the cooperation. The example perhaps of the Council for the Development of Social Science based in Dakar, Côte d'Azur, becomes a very interesting one in the sense that it is an independent intellectual space which pursues research funded externally, but without losing its agenda of producing Africa-centered knowledge. Another issue which I will raise in passing is the impact of neoliberalism on partnerships and knowledge. Particularly, I will think about this from also the vantage point of my previous location in Africa, whereby because of neoliberalism or Washington consensus and structural adjustment programs, there's a tendency, the impact was actually to destroy the public education sector, particularly the public university. And there was redefinition of knowledge itself, that knowledge then becoming in service of the capitalist imperatives, to the extent that because of desperation, you found the academics from the global South moving between two extremes, consultancy and sycophancy. Sycophancy in terms of praising the dictatorial regimes, and the consultancy allowing themselves to be used by those with money to do the research which is determined from outside. I wanted to raise that because it's something which we normally don't speak about when we speak about these issues of partnerships. But I don't want to go on and on, but I want to end and conclude by actually talking about our planetary decolonization of today and the implications for partnerships. And I'm drawing this question of planetary decolonization of today from the insurgent and the resurgent movements such as the Roads Must Fall and the Fees Must Fall movements, which have put, once again, the question of decolonization on the planetary stage. But I want to end by talking about what can we do in these partnerships to resolve some of the problems which I have just raised, and which I think Aram Zahia also raised. And this is the issue of the dominance, he called it Eurocentrism, the overrepresentation of knowledge from the global north. And secondly, the overrepresentation of that knowledge in theory and in education. How do we deal with that? I think one of the decolonial interventions have been trying to give us the language and the concepts which we can use to deal with that question. particularly the concept of moving the center coming from Ndlovu-Gathseni, as well as the concept of shifting the geography and the biography of knowledge. I think the partnerships needs to take those concepts very seriously if we are to proceed. And the very issue which I spoke about at the beginning, if indeed it is true that there is an epistemic crisis, it means that part of the agenda of the partnerships of this century is to rethink thinking itself in such a way that we come up with another knowledge which takes us out of the present crisis into the future. And bringing in a very basic argument like, can you use the same knowledges which plunge us into the present crisis as the same knowledges which can take us into the future? I don't think is as easy as that. And another key element in these partnerships, global partnerships, which we need to take seriously, and again, thanks to the work of the indigenous peoples movement, the feminist movements, and the decolonial movements, is the issue of the emphasis that as we do the partnerships, we need to be prepared to unlearn some of the cultures, the attitudes of coming from a colonial model of the world, so that we relearn another way of relating to each other in a better way. And I want to end by saying we're meeting at a very, very interesting moment where there is profound dissatisfaction with the dominant and the hegemonic knowledge, and where there is really what some will call an epistemic interregnum. The knowledge which took us to the present is exhausted but is not dead. The one which is supposed to emerge is not emerging as fast as it's supposed to. So we have, in the Gramscian sense, an interregnum. But what we need partnerships for epistemic reconstitution. I think there's that importance that we don't only critique the dominant knowledge, but we must be critiquing while at the same time doing reconstitution of knowledge, involving embracement of what I will call ecologies of knowledges, and also thinking across traditions and adopting perhaps what Cornell calls mosaic epistemology. And the global North and the global South needs to, in order for these partnerships to be sustainable, we need perhaps to acknowledge our incompleteness without each other. Human beings being indebted to one another, and the knowledge flowing from various provinces of the world to enrich the human experience. And it's speaking really in terms of the reality of the human condition being about mobility of beings, mobility of things, mobility of commodities, and mobility of ideas. And this realities must form a strong basis for partnerships as the secure future in knowledge production and beyond. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gathseni, for this very inspiring and, I dare say, tasking keynote. I think you have given us a lot of food for thought, and you've given us some clear points to investigate and to hold ourselves accountable as we are progressing on this path of partnership, where you tasked us to really consider the uneven power relations, to question received knowledges, and to ask ourselves how we can actually move beyond critique towards epistemic reconstitution, towards mosaic epistemologies. I believe there are many things in what we've just heard that we can and should revisit at the GPN. I'm looking forward to this ongoing debate. However, right now, we want to invite all of you who have witnessed this keynote to engage in discussion with our keynote speaker, specifically to ask questions. So we would like to invite you to do one of two things. You could ask a question in the chat simply by typing it in the chat, or if you prefer to speak and raise your question, you could type a plus sign into the chat, which we will then use as a speakers list to call on you to ask your question. Now, we have about 20 minutes of discussion time, for which reason we would like to ask those of you who speak, also in respecting the time of everybody else, to keep your question to a maximum of 2 minutes. And I'd like to politely and kindly remind you that a question is something that is rather brief and succinct, and something that has a question mark in the end. So with that, I would like to open the floor for questions. Okay, I see that Devan Pillai would like to raise a question. Yes, please.
Yes, thank you, Aram, and thank you for a very inspiring opening address, which I thoroughly enjoyed. There was one thing that you mentioned, which I wanted to latch onto, because this is a debate now that's re-emerging, but it's always there, about the post-colonial perspective and the anti-imperialist perspective, which can be a very nourishing and necessary counterpoint to the perspective of modernity, of Western modernity. However, it can also be a very narrow perspective, a nativist perspective. For example, the current debate, I've just seen a brilliant critique from someone in Jordan, regarding what's happening in France and the beheading, etc. And the inability of countries and peoples in the developing world to introspect in as much as they engage in a strong critique of colonialism, but the inability to introspect in relation to their own issues and a sense of perpetual victimhood, and how to get that balance right, I think is a major challenge. So for example, in Zimbabwe, the anti-imperialist rhetoric of Robert Mugabe just camouflaged his own looting of his economy and its repression of his own people. We have a similar problem in South Africa, as I'm sure you are very, very familiar with. We don't necessarily blame, well, we don't, we have a different colonial experience of what people call internal colonialism. So we don't blame everything on the external. We blame, some of us blame everything on the white people as a proxy for the external imposition, without looking, much more critically at the full array of challenges that we face. And I know, coming from a Marxist perspective, although I'm also open to all these other perspectives, the universalizing logic of capital not being lost in our necessity to look at the particular in our social formations. So it's that dialectical relationship. And I like what you said about the need for all of us as partners to have that convivial, you didn't use the word convivial, but I'm sure you meant that convivial interaction in order to enhance the synergies of all our different perspectives, including Western perspectives, where they are valuable. So it's not a question, I suppose that's the question. Is that what you would agree with?
Okay, thank you, Devin, for raising this question. And I would like to give Professor Ndlovu-Gathseni opportunity to respond directly.
Thank you, Devin Pillai, for that that question. It's a haunting question, if I may put it that way, it's a haunting question, and it's a question which is also very necessary in the sense that the decolonial project has its own darker side, if I might say, in the sense that there are some versions which are nativist, ghettoist, which are really about closure rather than opening. I'm for decolonization as an opening rather than as a closure. I'm for decolonization whereby it's a recognition of the diversity of the human species. I'm also for a decolonization which does not then degenerate into a psychology of victimhood, to the extent that everything which is problematic, you then project it externally and you don't do introspection. I like the work of Frantz Fanon, for instance, in the sense of talking about pitfalls of consciousness. But I also link that again with colonialism, without necessarily saying a person like myself, produced by a modern university, I have my own pitfalls born out of the way I was produced as an intellectual. And I can't actually then project my problems outside. I need to introspect first before I even project them outside. So I really accept that caution needs to be always maintained as we embark on these struggles of decolonization, because they are struggles. As struggles, they are never perfect. As you know, it's different schools and also internal tensions within the decolonial movements. You can go back to people think the negritude movements. You can see the tensions, but as people confront what they think is a common problem, there are always pitfalls, and I will accept that that they are indeed. That is not a discourse which then say be irresponsible and blame others. No, is not what we're advancing.
Thank you for this answer. I would now like to raise a question that was put to you in the chat, and I'll read it out for everybody. The question comes from Carlos Mario, and he writes, 50 years ago in Latin America, Orlando Fals Borda published a book called Own Science and Intellectual Colonialism. Later, he developed the participatory action research method. Can we account that attempt as an epistemic reconstitution? Or towards which perspectives should go this epistemic reconstitution that you have mentioned?
Indeed, there is a question and an answer to the question in that question as well, because this example which is given is indeed an interesting part of a critique. Then you follow it up with a practical action. But the reconstitution of epistemology, which I'm thinking about a reconstitution of epistemology in its plurality. And when I'm talking about this plurality, I'm thinking we can't say the knowledge of the West is no longer useful. That won't be true. It is still useful. It might be exhausted. When we say something is exhausted, we don't mean it's no longer useful. It is still useful. And the element of its exhaustion is an open window, which then say, what about the other knowledges? How can you bring in the other knowledges so that we deal with this question of exhaustion? And they deal with the question not only of exhaustion, and they confront openly and they embrace the question of plurality of people. We always argue that we have nothing against Europe per se, we have nothing against North America per se. What we are against is when North America and Europe pretend to be the center of the world. That is not true. It's not the center of the world. There are many other provinces of the world. So when people speak perhaps about re-provincializing Europe, pushing Europe to be an important part of the province of the world rather than the center of the world, then other provinces of the world also bring in whatever they have. That is my thinking about the reconstitution of knowledge in the 21st century.
Thank you. I would like to directly follow up with another question from the chat where our own Tata Diawara is asking, thank you a lot for the incredibly rich input. What is a decolonial perspective's stance on the progression of digitalization on the African continent, for instance, in the context of the African Continental Free Trade Area? Is digitalization manifestation of developmentalism being a part of a dominant epistemic realm, which is experiencing a crisis, or does it also bear possibilities with regards to local knowledge?
Well, that's an important question. I think that's a question which really addresses the main issue about where does the question of technology sits in the whole broader question of decolonization. I don't think the decolonization we are talking about is to reject technology per se. Is actually to make technology work for the people. If the digitalization actually advances the prospects of human life, because the challenge which we're having, I'm not sure whether all people will agree, the challenge which we're having is the challenge of the fate of humanity here on earth at the present moment. And the decolonization is not a romantic view. It's really about the fate of humanity today. And if technologies can advance that, why not? Why not use digitalization? There's no reason why you can fight with the technology. Technology, as long as it enhances a human life, is fine. But you remember the concept which Achille Mbembe is developing these days, the question of technomolecular colonialism, that technologies can also exacerbate the inequalities in a way. We need to be careful as we use them.
Thank you. Now, since I guess people are gathering their thoughts, and you are receiving thanks for the answers given so far. I might just quickly use the opportunity to raise a question myself as the moderator. Now, my question has to do with linking.
To reach out to you and say, we've got to do this ourselves, guys. You know, test yourselves, stay vigilant, stay safe,
Hubertus?
yourself. You can't rely on those tests.
Hubertus, I'm sorry, yes, thank you. Okay, sorry about that. So my question has to do with linking the crisis of knowledge you alluded to and the opening that you spoke to with the question of the climate crisis. And particularly, I'm interested in the unequal impact that is also racialized in terms of how people across the globe are impacted, both in terms of people on the African continent and also people of color in Western diasporas. So my question is, from a decolonial angle, how can we negotiate the introduction of such knowledges that can make visible these unequal impacts in the context of a playing field that is hierarchized, as you described?
No, thank you so much about that question on climate question. I think the decolonial thought has actually revealed that I think there was a major problem from the way capitalism itself unfolded and the modernity unfolded. Unfolding in the sense that it redefines human and the nature relations in a particular way, particularly the idea that nature is really a human resource which is available for the human to exploit ad infinitum. I think there was a foundational crisis there already, roots of a foundational crisis there already. And the idea that the human is not part of nature, I think, again, we begin to see the problems, the root of the problems, and they were not surprised by the consequences today. That because of that type of thinking, whereby you are thinking in dualistic terms, rather than in terms of compositionality and holism, you then end up actually relating to the environment in such a way that you destroy yourself in the process. And that's the consequence which we are facing at the moment. And your question actually then speaks to how do you deal with this issue of differential impact of climate change without changing the system itself. So the major value of decolonial thinking is to take us back to big questions, big questions about structures, systems, and the institutions, which needs to change in order to change also to alleviate or mitigate the impact of this. And the idea that we have an environmental crisis, I always come from this perspective of the relationship between knowledge and the reality, that perhaps epistemology frames ontology. Some of the things which really manifest as systemic, structural, they are fundamentally epistemic in origination. And that's why I like the GNP intervening in the knowledge space, because if you change many of the things in the knowledge space, you can change so many other things at the institutional and the systemic level, particularly the question of inequalities and all this. And the major problem about today is that the moment of the COVID-19 pandemic itself has revealed that maintaining inequalities actually threatens even those who benefit from the inequalities. So it's important that in the post-COVID world, we actually sober up to this reality that maintaining geographies of poverty and geographies of opulence, some of the problems which you expected to affect the geographies of poverty, it comes to actually haunt you as well. So we need really to think as survivors. As survivors, you think as survivors, and you think from a survivor consciousness that all of us were affected and all of us were human beings. I think that's a major lesson.
Yes, thank you so much for this answer and for also linking it to the current moment we're living in terms of the corona pandemic and its ramifications, and again, the openings in terms of thinking about unequal power relations in new ways. Now, with that said, I would ask participants, to consider, now is your chance, now is the opportunity. You could ask, one of you could ask one final question to our keynote speaker. If that is not forthcoming right now, I would once again thank you profoundly, Professor Sabelo Ndlovu-Gathseni, for your contributions and for sharing such a broad but also incisive perspective with us, which I believe has given us at the GPN a lot to consider further, to chew on, as some would say, at the right moment in time as we embark on this project. Now,
thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. Yes, and again, what I can say, what people are saying in the chat is they again express their thanks and gratitudes. So yes, thank you for being with us now. Now, with that said, I would now hand back to Aram, to Professor Aram Ziai, for the closing remarks for today's session of our kickoff conference. Now, before I do that, though, I would be remiss if I wouldn't remind everybody who is here with us right now to kindly assist us in further thinking about what we're doing and helping us to improve what we do further. And you can do that by visiting the link that has been shared in the chat right now. We would be very, very grateful if you could visit this website, this link, I'm sorry, to fill in our very, very short evaluation form. And in doing so, you will actually help us to think about the way we produce and disseminate knowledge and help us to change it in some of the ways potentially that were just mentioned and called for. So with that, I would like to hand over to Aram.
Well, thanks, Kwesi. Thanks also from my side to Sabelo and Ndlovu-Gathseni for the wonderful keynote. I would just like to take the opportunity to also thank the others who have been making this event possible here, notably the staff of the GPN. So that is Simone Buckel, Fiona Fay, Dagmar Hetterscheid, Kwesi Akins, Shannon Johnson, and also our student assistants, Tata, Diana, Mia, Romke, Renata. Thanks to all of you who've done a wonderful job. And I would like to end by taking up one of the hints that we have been given in the keynote, and to basically repeat what Sabelo has been mentioning in his final remark, that this COVID crisis that we are currently going through for the past few months and the months to come as well, teaches us two very valuable lessons. And the one is that the persistent inequalities are the major problem that we have right now, and that basically they are just coming to the fore through this crisis. But let us not forget that this inequality has been leading to tens of thousands of deaths already before the crisis. And the second lesson, I think, is that we also, and here I come back to Wangari Maathai, although we are so advanced in terms of technology and mastering science, we are still human beings, and as such being very vulnerable to this virus that no one had actually foreseen, and that this reminds us of the fact that we are not only masters of science, but still parts of nature, and that maybe there should be maybe one of the elements pointing a way forward to a decolonial future should also be this humility and the memory that we are actually still very vulnerable beings, and as such should take care to, basically to care more about ourselves, our relation to one another, and our relation to nature. So I'm very much looking forward to discussing with the GPN members our common research agenda, but this will then be the task of the next meeting. For now, I would like to thank you all and hope that you enjoyed this event as much as I did. Farewell. See you.
Yes. Before we say goodbye to all of you, I would like to close in adding two very important names to the thank you list. And these are the names of Myriam Fongwe and Thierry Boquedio, our translators for today, because obviously the sharing of knowledges and global partnership also requires us to be mindful of multilinguality and also knowledge hierarchies between languages. And that is why translation is a key part of what we do and the knowledge we want to share. So thank you for the two translators that have enabled Francophone partners and Francophone guests to also participate in today's proceedings. So with that, I want to leave you with a few impressions from the chat where people are also joining me in thanking the translators profusely, and where people are continuing to thank our keynote speaker and the GPN network for what people call an inspiring session. And with that, we would now like to say goodbye for today. We hope to see the GPN members on Monday for the second day of our kickoff conference. And we do hope to see all of you very soon in the context of the many activities that the GPN has embarked on and will be embarking on in the near future. So thank you for being with us today. Stay healthy and see you soon.